Hi guys, it's Ginge. I am a part of the Mage system, but not the host. This will probably be my last video having boobs, except I was probably going to pre-film a video the week of surgery, but just know that by the time that video comes out, we will no longer have tatas. So I'm just sort of having my little last hurrah with them, so just know that from here on out, if you see me with boobs, they are fake. I probably stuffed my bra or something. Today we're going to be talking about weed and DID and how those two things go together, at least in our experience. Actually, our first video we ever filmed for this channel, to my knowledge, was about weed and DID, and Nico filmed it, bless her soul, which Nico is now integrated with L. So we since privated the video. I didn't do it myself, so I'm not sure why, but I figured it would be a fun little thing to remake that video. So come chill with me. I've got some candles and some incense burning and some wine, and let's talk about it. So weed and DID, how does it affect us? Well, it actually seems to break down the dissociative barriers that we often have between each other. I mean, it doesn't break them all the way down, like we're still different people, but we can talk together so much better. And this is one of the ways that we primarily communicated with each other after first finding out that we had DID, was we would often smoke weed and then we would all get together and talk about different things. It was actually what I myself consider sort of like the golden age of our DID journey, because things were just easier to communicate then, and there was a lot less sadness or doubt about it. Oddly enough, it feels like the further away from finding out that we've gotten, the more doubt we have sometimes. So I don't know, that's a whole thing, but it's getting better. We actually found out that we had DID while we were high. So I don't know if I'll mention this part in the how we found out we had DID video, but basically shortly before we found out we had DID, we were in the mental hospital and Elle was journaling about how at the time they saw a bathtub in their head and they knew that this bathtub was part of an inner world. And that's all they really knew. And they also knew this strange energy that they were sensing in their dreams that was eerie and just generally indescribable. And later, after they got home, they got high and they named this energy. They named it Elena. And they started writing down qualities that Elena had, just things that Elena liked or things that were associated with Elena. And then Elle started writing down qualities that resonated with them. So the things that resonated with who they were and what they liked. And at the time, Elle knew about DID, being a psych major, or just someone interested in psychology at the time. But they figured that they could never have it just because of the sort of stigma around DID, that every case of it is always very extreme. And then later, Elle realized while making these lists that, well, we think this is a different person. And so I think that whenever we smoke weed, it allows us to actually take the thoughts that we're having seriously. I don't know the science behind it, but I know that I watched like a science video about weed one time, and it did say that weed has like, you have like novelty receptors or some shit, and weed like activates those, so things are new. So whenever you have a thought, your brain thinks that's a super original thought, which is why whenever you have thoughts that you think are really funny whenever you're high, and then you write them down and then you look back on them in the morning and you're like, that was so stupid. That's why, because weed makes you see things in a novel way that you wouldn't usually think about it that way otherwise. And so often the thoughts that are dismissed in everyday life due to just general doubt of having DID or dissociation, a lot of those thoughts that are brushed off or ignored become magnified whenever high. so altars' voices are a lot more loud. And I remember that one time whenever we were high, we were all talking, or at least some of us were, and we closed our eyes, and then suddenly we were in this room where there was a screen at the front of it, and that was where the eyeballs opened and we could see everything. But inside it was just this room shaped kind of like a semicircle with all of these chairs that faced the screen, and we were all just sitting in there talking. And we discovered a new aspect of the inner world at that point. Nowadays, things are a little different between us. We try to keep an inner world, but it just doesn't really stick a lot of the time. And whenever we're high, we don't have the same kind of conversations that we used to. I think that's just a part of getting older, and also a part of becoming a more experienced weed user, is that the more you get into your weed journey, the less your highs are going to look like they did whenever you first started smoking weed, unfortunately. I know that now most of us don't like to get very high. I think whenever you're younger and you start smoking weed, there is this idea that you just want to get as high as possible and you want to have as much fun as possible, because the more weed you smoke, the more fun you'll have, of course. But as we get older, weed doesn't really work that way for us anymore. And if we get really high, we're just sort of like, okay, well, I'm slightly uncomfortable. Now we just smoke a little bit, sometimes maybe like twice a week, in order to relax. And sometimes conversations are had between two parts, but not always. It is mostly just used as a little treat sometimes. So anyways, this is a little off topic, but I feel like I've looked better whenever I've gotten ready. I don't know, there's something about this time that's a little weird. I think it's the fact that Elle's eyebrows are filling in more, so it's getting a little bit harder to cover up like certain parts of them that look a little more masculine. Like we have this like little bit of hair right here at the top. It's like a little triangle of hair, and I have to figure out what to do about that. And so, I don't know, it just doesn't look the same. Also, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but do you see those very tiny mustache hairs? Because I do. I see it. As far as things like alcohol, I find that doesn't necessarily connect alters together more or make them more likely to talk to each other. But whenever we do talk to each other, at least whenever I, Ginger, talk to other alters, it's really something. Oftentimes, I'll just find that whenever two alters are co-conscious during drunk, they'll sit in front of the mirror and just, I don't even know how to describe. We grew up in a suburb where there really wasn't anything to do, so a lot of the people around us would just get high and drink for fun and do things like that. So there was a lot of things like that happened. So yes, we were drunk as an underage kid a lot, but I think a lot of people were. But now we can buy our own wine. I contemplated getting high for this video just for the sake of doing it, but I don't want to. And I think that's an important thing to remember, because when you're young, sometimes you just take every opportunity to do a thing that you can get. But then as you get older, you realize, I don't want to do that right now. Maybe we'll do a video a little bit high at some point. It might be kind of interesting. I think something that's interesting to mention is littles and their role and how smoking weed works for us. Because I think that whenever a little is present during being high, what do? Do you push that little to go back, or do you just let them see what's going on? And in our experience, we are very bad at keeping an altar away from the front if an altar wants to be there. And so in the times that we have been high, the littles, if they are present, are just sort of present. It's not really distressing to them. They are generally mature, enough to understand what's going on. And I don't know, some people might think that's really unethical, but it's not something we can really control very well. The littles are never distressed. They're completely supervised. All of this is in our personal experience, so I would really love to hear what you guys' personal experience is. Use systems in the comments if you have ever engaged in smoking weed while having a system, how that sort of works for you guys. Yeah. There are a few other drugs that we've sadly experimented with once or twice, but those really didn't have any substantial impact on it. But I think it's worth noting to assess the reason why you're doing a drug. And personally, I think that you can get addicted to weed. I really think you can. And a lot of people act like it's totally non-addictive. And while I do think that weed is a really great thing for society and that it poses a great alternative to other drugs that are less good, and it is much more difficult to get addicted to, but I totally think you can get addicted to weed, especially if you have an addictive personality. And moreover, people will say, okay, well, you can get psychologically addicted to weed, but you cannot get physically addicted to weed because it is not a physically addictive drug. However, I would also beg to differ from that, because in our past, I don't know if it's a full-blown weed addiction, but I do know that we smoked weed every day so that we could sleep and eat, which actually does sound like a weed addiction to me. Because if you are dependent on a drug and if you do not have it, you cannot eat or sleep, which are pretty important things in my opinion, then I would classify that as a physical addiction, you know? So just be careful. Use drugs as a treat. And when I say drugs, I probably not hard drugs, but like, weed or like wine. Use those things as like a treat for sometimes, but I wouldn't recommend using them a lot. With weed, I think it's definitely more acceptable to use it a lot if you have like a necessity to use it, like a medical necessity, or you have like a lot of anxiety, but just make sure you're using it for those things, and that if you stopped using it and you had those things, it was because you would have those things anyway and not just because you were withdrawing from weed. Well, I hope you guys are having a great day. I'm a little bit low energy today, so sorry about that. I will see you soon. We'll see you on the other side. Wish us luck on our top surgery. After a while, I bet Elle will probably make a video about it, and maybe you guys can see our results. So yeah, I'll see you girlies later.